Welcome everyone to Neverwinter on PC. My name is Rainer and today I will be explaining all there is to know about the new stat system. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you would like to see more information or videos about Neverwinter, hit the subscribe button. In this video I'll be telling you a little bit about all the individual stats in detail with formulas of the contribution of stats. I will also show you the damage and healing formulas, and then in the end for each role I will show you how to determine which stats to focus on first and at what moment, because it's not as straightforward as some people make it out to be. So first of all, we have a short general story. To the left you can see an index of all the small subsections of the stats. But first we start with the general part. A lot of people already know this, but ratings are now kept to total item level. So your item level now determines what the maximum for your ratings is. If your ratings are higher than the item level, those ratings do not have any effect. If you reach that total item level for a stat, you get 50% efficiency in that stat. That's the maximum that your flat ratings can contribute to a stat. And as I said, more ratings do not grant any effect. They are totally wasted and the stat will be orange if it is kept. If you are below total item level in a stat, every 1000 that you are below that, you lose 1%. So if you have an item level of 50,000, which now is normal, and your rating is at 48,000, you do not have 50%, but you have 48%. That's an easy example. Other percentage bonuses, like race bonuses, foods, companion equip powers, as you can see here, are added to the rating percentage. So they're not added to the 50% of your rating percentage. They're added separately, and the total of your rating and those percentage bonuses are 90%. That's the maximum efficiency you can get in a stat. So here's a short example. So if you have your ratings kept, you can get 40% worth of percentage bonuses, because 50% leaves 40% open for percentage bonuses. If you do not have your ratings kept, you are at, for example, 35%, which is very low by the way, you can get a theoretical 55% worth of percentage bonuses. It's because 35 plus 55 is 90. So the percentage bonuses are definitely not kept at 40%, but the total is kept to 90%. So then we get to combined rating, and combined rating is a very, very interesting part of this new system. It's not new, we had it before, but the way the system works now, it's something to think about. So very simple, every item gives, first of all, item level times 15 stats. So if you have an item level 1000 item, a gear item of 1000 item level, it will give you a total of 15,000 stats. Combined rating goes into 15 base statistics. So that means theoretically an item could have item level the same as combined rating, because if you have 15,000 stats to give and you have an item level of 1000, if you have a combined rating of also 1000, that's also 15,000 stats distributed in your build. There is a problem though with this item level is combined rating. If you only would have items that have the same item level as combined rating, all your ratings would be 45%, because that's your starting point. So every point combined rating is lower than the item level of that item, that frees up 15 points of stats for, as I call it, specialization. So if you have an item level of 1000, once again, you have 15,000 stats. If the combined rating is 900, that's 100 less. That means you have 1,500 stats that can go into something else that you can use to boost up another rating that you want to raise, because you don't want to raise everything. Almost everything right now gives a lot of combined rating, so that removes a bit of specialization freedom. And one important thing to note about combined rating, the bigger the gap between item level and combined rating, the more you can lower your useless stats. Because if you have a high item level item that doesn't give control bonus, for example, your control bonus percentage will go down and you can specialize in something else, because your item level, once again, it determines your cap, and if you don't put points in a certain stat, your cap will go further away of your rating. So this is very important. So if you want to have a very strong specialized build, it often can be very useful to find things that have a big difference between item level and combined rating. Now, it is that most items have 90% of their stats in combined rating. Rings have 80%, so there isn't that much wiggle room, which is kind of sad. I wish there was more choice there, that you can pick items with a lower combined rating or a higher combined rating. You should have more freedom there what to pick, because that makes it so you can make specialized builds. So that's something that would be nice if that could be added at some point in the future. So total item level. So this is the first, well, it's actually the second. It's a very important stat, because as I said, the total item level is the total of all the item level of all the items equipped on your character. This is not changed from before. What has changed is that total item level now determines your base damage and the biggest chunk of your HP. And as I said before, it also determines the rating caps of all of your other stats. For damage, it's a very simple calculation. You take total item level, you divide it by 10, and that gives you your base damage. For healers, 10% is added, and for DPS is 20% is added. So this is very basic, the base amount of damage that you do. For HP, the formula is a little bit more tricky. You take total item level and you multiply that by 1 plus your paragon percentage. For healers, that's 10%. For tanks, that's 20%. You add the flat HP bonuses. That's your radiance and defense. That's insignias can give defense. I think there's companion equip bonuses that give defense. You have your rune stones. All of your items that don't give percentage HP but give flat HP, they're added there. Then you multiply that by 1 plus your constitution percentage, and then you multiply that once again by 1 plus your percentage bonuses, because you also have percentage bonuses. Those can be, so here you have your flat HP bonuses, enchantment runes, insignias. Your percentage bonuses can be raise bonuses for the metallic dragon bomb, for example. Boons give percentage bonuses, the bulwark boons. Some equip bonuses give percentage HP, stuff like that. So that is how your HP is calculated. That's your full HP actually. So let's go to the first of the regular between quotes statistics. First, power. We all know power, of course. Power gives a flat additional bonus to damage and healing. It's not more than that. The formula is also very, very simple. It's just you multiply by 1 plus your power percentage. Combined rating now also grants power, and this has not been like that in the past. In the past, as we know it from the system that's currently still on live, combined rating does not go into power, and with the new system it does. Power also now is kept to 90%, just as all the other stats. So at 90% power, your damage is basically multiplied by 1.9. One important factor to note, and this is true for all of the statistics, the more power you have, the less relative damage the next 1% increase is. Now this sounds very complicated, and to explain this a little bit more, I also made this sheet. As you can see here, if you are at a certain power percentage, that's at the bottom, and at the vertical lines you see your damage increase. If you are at 0% power, which is not possible by the way, 1% extra power would add 1% more damage. That's logical. If you are, for example, at 65%, you're approximately here, and you add 1% power, you only get 0.6% damage increase, because you already have a lot of power. So relatively seen, power has a diminishing effect, and this is true for all statistics. This has nothing to do with soft caps or hard caps or something like that. This is just diminishing returns of increasing a statistic. Every percent you add is 1%, but 1% on top of a higher number is relatively seen a lower increase. At the end of the video, I will have more of these graphs showing more of the statistics together, and you can see how they all interact with each other, because this is important to show when to increase what. So then we come to deflect. Deflect determines the chance that you deflect an incoming attack. And unlike before, this cannot be counted by anything. So in the old system, deflect was counted by accuracy. If you had accuracy capped, there were no deflects anymore. Now there will always be deflects. The formula for deflect is the value that you have divided by 1 plus your deflect chance multiplied by the severity of deflect, and that part will come in the next statistic. So your deflect chance will always be there, and it will always be the same. So if you have a 60% deflect chance on your stat sheet, you will always deflect 60% of the time. This is not reduced by anything. For NPCs, the deflect chance is always 50%. So NPCs will always deflect 50% of all the attacks, which sounds a lot because in the past they didn't deflect anything in the old system. But in order to overcome those deflects, we go to the next section, accuracy and deflect severity. So in the past, accuracy reduced the deflect chance, and this is not the case anymore. Accuracy now reduces enemy deflect severity. So that means if you have more accuracy, then deflected attacks will still do more damage. And if you have accuracy capped, then a deflected attack will do the same damage as a non-deflected attack. So you can overcome all of the deflection, basically. So this is the second part of the formula. First one was deflect chance, and now we have here the deflect severity, and from the deflect severity we remove the enemy accuracy. So in PvE, NPC deflect severity is 90%. So you have to, in order to overcome all of the deflect damage removal, you would need 90% accuracy. And I don't know if it's worth it, but we'll get there at the end of the video. So enemies also have accuracy, and that's 0%. So if you have 90% deflect severity, which is I think not possible at the moment, then you would actually have 90% here. It cannot be reduced by the enemy. So at 0% accuracy, you have zero accuracy. It's not possible, but let's say you have 0% accuracy on a deflection, only 53% of the damage will go through, because you will divide the damage that you do by 1 plus 90%, So that this almost it's divided by 1.9. That brings you to approximately 53% of the damage. If you have 90% accuracy, as I said, then this is 1 plus 50% times 0, so it's just 1. So if you divide damage by 1, you have all of the damage left over. So if you have 90% accuracy, then all of your damage will go through. The deflection will not reduce any damage. It will still be a deflection. It will still show up in the combat log as a deflect, but the damage will be the same. Then we get to combat advantage and awareness. Combat advantage and awareness have the same interaction as in the old system. More combat advantage means that attacks done in a combat advantage position do more damage, and awareness counters that. The formula is here. It's 1 plus your combat advantage percentage minus the enemy's awareness. Important to note, NPC awareness 0%, so your combat advantage will always have an effect, and this cannot be negative, of course. And enemy combat advantage starts at 90%. So if you look at this formula and you fill in 0% here, you almost have this, you actually have the same formula as power, which was 1 plus power percentage, because this is just nothing, this disappeared. But of course, although combat advantage has the same efficiency as power, you do need to be in a combat advantage position. Otherwise you get 0 extra damage. If you don't make use of the combat advantage positioning or use powers that give combat advantage, you do not get anything. So it is a little less good as power, but in trials, for example, combat advantage will be very, very strong. So next up is critical strike. Critical strike determines your chance to do a critical strike. As with all stats, now critical strike caps at 90% instead of the old 50%. In the old system, you could crit at a maximum of 50% of the time. So now you can crit a lot more often. Critical strike formula is written here. Again, we have a small part that is grayed out, which will come in the next section. So critical strike is not reduced by anything. It's not reduced by critical avoidance anymore. So critical avoidance actually reduces something else now. So if you have 80% critical strike on your stat sheet, that means that really 80% of your attacks will crit. For enemies in PvE, critical strike rate is always 50%. And in order to make good use of critical strike stats, you also have to raise critical severity, which is pretty easy. A lot of people will have noticed that if you go into the new system, most people will have it kept automatically. This might not be the case anymore once they are finished changing everything, but it seems to be pretty easy to cap critical severity. But if you would have 0% critical severity, then you just have 1 plus your crit percentage times 0, so you don't do any extra damage. And if this is very low, also your critical strike will not have that much use. So it's actually, if you have them both at a pretty low level, the best way to increase this is to increase them both at the same rate. So if you have them both at 40% or 50%, let's say 50%, and you want to increase them, and you have 10% to divide, put 5% in each. That's the best way to maximize the usage of these statistics. So instead of making this 60 and this 40, make this 50 and 55 and 50. 60 and 40, yeah, 50, 50. No, instead of making it 60 and 50, if they're both 50, make this 55 and 55. That will increase your damage by more. So then we get to the second part of that formula pit, critical severity and critical avoidance. Critical severity and critical avoidance both determine now the amount of damage a critical hit will do. Critical severity will increase it, and critical avoidance will lower the damage. So here you see the formula again. Critical severity here will increase the damage of a crit as it was before, but now it's kept at 90%, of course, just like everything. And critical avoidance is subtracted from critical severity. Luckily, NPCs do not have critical avoidance, so if you have 90% critical severity, you do 90% more damage on a crit. And critical avoidance and critical severity of the enemies in PvE is 90%. So your critical avoidance also has an effect, up to 90%, where your crits will do the same damage as non-crits if you have critical avoidance kept. Also important to note, and this has not changed from the old system, critical severity still has half the effectiveness on heals. So on heals you don't have critical avoidance, I hope. Would be very funny if a tank's critical avoidance would decrease the crit healing of a healer. But instead of this minus enemy critical avoidance here, we have critical severity divided by 2. So if you have 90% critical severity on a healer, you actually have the benefit of a 45% critical severity instead of 90%. That's just how it is. Basically, the devs thought healing was too strong. So then we get to defense. Defense is also changed quite a bit. As always, defense will passively decrease incoming damage. You don't have to do anything for it. In the past, this was counted by armor penetration. So if you kept your armor penetration, you would go through all of the defense of the enemy, but armor penetration has been removed, as we know. So now the formula is the damage that was done divided by 1 plus the defense of the enemy. In PvE, the defense of enemies is 50%, which means that if you have no defense debuffs, 1/3 of your damage is always blocked. Because if you divide something by 1.5, you have a reduction of 1/3. So if you have 3 divided by 1.5, you get 2. So 1/3 of your damage is always removed. Now there are, of course, ways of reducing defense of an enemy. It's not armor penetration anymore, but some, for example, weapon enchantments, but I think there's also companion equip bonuses. There are some things, I think also companion enhancement powers, things like that. There are ways to decrease this 50%, which is static for the NPCs. And that will make everyone do more damage, of course. So then we get to Forte. Forte, I don't know how to pronounce this thing. It's a new stat, completely new. And it basically changes Forte, I don't know. It changes rating stats and percentage stats also, by the way, but I don't think there's, yeah, there is charisma, it's not Forte, but it changes Forte stats into Paragon specific percentage contributions. So this is very useful to get to 90% caps of specific stats. But the sad thing about Forte, you have to be lucky enough to get the right Forte stats because they're linked to your Paragon. Forte, 100% of your Forte percentage is divided in other percentage contributions. Nothing is really added or removed. So if you have 50% Forte percentage, you get 50% divided into 3 other percentage contributions. It's not multiplied by anything or something like that. It's kind of a semi-generalization stat, I guess, because you cannot really control it. There's no formula for this. If you want to know what the Paragon contributions are, you can see it here. So I can give you an example as well. So as I said, if you have 50%, let's make it 60. If you have 60% Forte percentage, so including all bonus, including charisma, and you have your Forte capped for some reason, you have 60% Forte percentage. If you are a rogue assassin and you have 60% Forte, 50% of those 60%, so 30% go into power. Oops. So 30% go into power, 15% go into critical severity, and 15% go into deflect severity. So you cannot really control it, but you will always get these stats, and these are different per paragon, and they are what they are. So now we get to control bonus. We had control bonus before. Control bonus increased the duration of crowd control effects of your powers. This has not changed. This was always there, but now like power and everything else, control bonus is now affected by combined rating. So combined rating also adds stats in control bonus. It's not a percentage anymore as a base. It was percentage always in your extra powers, bonuses, I don't know what they were called. But now it's also a rating, which is capped at item level. For control bonus, I don't have a formula. There is probably a formula to determine the length of crowd control effects, but it's not really adding something in the damage formula, so I didn't include it here. Then control resist. Control resist, it lowers the duration of incoming crowd control effects on your character. So if something knocks you up or something else, the duration of that effect is lowered. This is also not changed actually. What is changed, that control resist is now also affected by combined rating. So it's a normal rating stat now, which your ratings are turned into percentage, etc, etc. We know the drill. There's also no formula here because it doesn't add anything in the damage formula. Then we have incoming healing. Incoming healing increases the amount of healing received. Very simple. Also, this has not changed. It's the same as before. It's now also affected by combined rating. So combined rating increases incoming healing. So the formula for incoming healing is multiply 1 plus incoming healing percentage. So if you have 50% incoming healing, you get 50% bigger heals. Very simple. So definitely not something to neglect for example, tanks. Then we get to outgoing healing. Outgoing healing increases the effectiveness of your healing powers. So this is very important for healers. The formula is multiply 1 plus outgoing healing percentage. So this is the same efficiency as power for healers. It increases your, well, at least for the healing powers, that is. For damaging powers, this does nothing for healers as well. But for healing powers, this has the same effectiveness as power. This stat is now also affected by combined rating. So I can continue everything actually on this list, except for total item level and general, is all affected by combined rating now. And yeah, as I said, outgoing healing has the same efficiency as power for healers. So do not neglect this stat. It's very, very important. It should be the same as your power, but we will get there. We will get there. So this is all of the stats. Next up are the formulas, and we start with the damage formula. And this is the average damage. So it's not the maximum I add in chances. So this is the average value. So damage is total item level divided by 10. It's actually all in the previous sheets as well. You add 10% for healers, 20% for DPS. We multiply that by 1 plus your power percentage. Then we divide that by 1 plus your deflect chance multiplied by deflect severity minus your enemy accuracy. Then we multiply that by 1 plus your combat advantage uptime multiplied by combat advantage stat minus enemy awareness. Then we multiply that by 1 plus critical strike percentage, so your chance, multiplied by critical severity minus enemy critical avoidance percentage. There's a lot of long words here. Then we divide that by 1 plus enemy defense. And this is then multiplied by magnitude divided by 100, multiplied by buffs, debuffs, in strength, etc. So a lot of stuff is also added in here. I didn't add the details because we're talking about statistics themselves. So of course for NPCs, a lot of these values can be already filled in because we know them. So that's here. So in PvE, this is basically the base formula. These are all 0. So that's what they meant with we removed counter stats. In PvP, you of course still have these counter stats, so they are still doing something. And on players, these counter stats will also do something. But the PvE enemies, the NPCs, will not reduce our effectiveness in deflect, combat advantage, and critical strike. And here we have defense, of course, which is always 50%. Then we go to the healing formula of healers. Pretty similar, but still a little bit different. We start again with total item level divided by 10 and then multiply 1.1 because we're healers. That's the 10% for healers. Other classes, I doubt I don't know what happens with the DPS on a healing power. I don't know if they would do multiply by 1.2. That's actually interesting because of course as a DPS you can also heal. So I guess it would be multiplied by 20% then. Anyway, then we again multiply by 1 plus power percentage, so maximum of 1.9. We multiply by critical strike, multiplied by critical severity, and then divided by 2. As I said, healing has, for healing, critical severity effectiveness is divided by 2. And then what's special for healing, we add 1 plus your outgoing healing percentage. So that's basically the same as power, is again added in outgoing healing here. And then we multiply by magnitude times divided by 100, and then buffs, debuffs, and strength, etc. what's included. So the healing formula, a little bit more simple because you don't have any deflects, defense, and a combat advantage here. But we get outgoing healing back for that. So now, after all the story, we want to know, of course, what stats to focus on. And let's do that first for a DPS. In order to explain this a bit, and I already showed this a little bit with power, all stats, very bright, have a diminishing return. You can see here for power, accuracy, combat advantage at 85% uptime. This is important. This can be varying, of course. At 100% this will be higher, of course. Then we have crit if you are already at 90% crit severity. And this is if you would divide your points evenly between critical severity and critical strike. So at the horizontal line, you can see at what percentage we start. And at the vertical line, you see how much the damage increase is. So this shows you the damage increase for every 1% added into a stat. So if we are at 0% power, as shown before, and you add 1% power, you add 1% damage. If you are at, what is it here, approximately 66, 67% power, and you add 1% power, you gain about 0.6% damage. Now you see that the orange line of power is the highest line, but you also see that at some point it is at a certain value. Let's say we are at 70%. At 70%, 1% power will only give you 0.59% damage approximately. And other lines like combat advantage and crit at 90% severity can be higher. So it depends on where we are on these curves, what attribute to increase. So of course 0% until 45 for DPS, we will never have our offensive stats below 45%. That will mean that we're really dumping them. So in order to remove everything below, I made a second diagram that starts at 45%. And here you can very clearly see everything tends to go towards 0.5 in the end. And here you can see a little bit easier at which point. So if you are at 75% power and your critical severity is 90% and your critical strike is below 65, it's actually better to add points in here because they will give you more of a damage increase. But overall, power will give you the most. Combat advantage at 85% will be third after critical strike, but only if critical severity is at 90%, which is not always a given. If combat advantage would be at 100%, this would be the same as power, by the way. So this can shift up and down based on skill, the green line. What we also can see at the bottom, so if you are very low with crit and critical severity, adding or actually giving 0.5% in each. So what I show here, if you are at 50% for crit and critical severity and you add 0.5% for both of them, you get a 40% damage increase. And you can see that this one is actually a little bit of a curve the other way around. But yeah, it's a very low line, and actually the lowest line most of the time is accuracy here. Accuracy, since they changed the deflect formula, accuracy is not that great anymore. So accuracy gives the lowest benefit of all, except when your crit and critical severity are super low, but that hardly ever is the case. So yeah, with this graph, and maybe you have some questions about this, I'm always available for questions in my Discord. But with this graph, you basically can determine when to increase which statistic. Yeah. So we can do the same thing for a healer. For a healer, we have to do with power, which you don't see because it's underneath this outgoing healing here, because it's exactly the same. We have critical strike if critical severity is at 90%. And then we have if you would increase both by 0.5%. So you can see that power and outgoing healing are by far better than anything that has to do with crit. Yeah, and crit and critical severity, you should just raise at the same rate. So if your crit is lower than severity, raise your crit, and the other way around. But for healers, all focus is on power and outgoing healing because it's always higher efficiency than crit and critical severity. Very easy here. To make this even easier to read, I also removed the 0 to 45% in this picture. But yeah, it doesn't really change the picture. It just makes it more clear that this here, even at 89%, power and outgoing healing still give the highest output. To note here, and that's very important, if you are at 65% power or I don't know, 70%, doesn't matter, and your outgoing healing is at a lower percentage, and you have the choice of increasing either of them, increase always the lowest of the two. Because as you see, you have diminishing returns. So if you have 60% outgoing healing and 70% power, increase your outgoing healing. They have to go up at the same rate, basically. So this is very, very easy actually for healers. So this should not be a big surprise. We can also do the same for tanks. Again, total picture here. This one is a little bit all over the place. We have actually 5 lines in this picture, but once again, defense and awareness are on top of each other. This is only true for boss fights, because in boss fights, enemies always have combat advantage now, for Alistair and Cyril at least. I don't know if all bosses have that, but if you have a boss with 100% combat advantage uptime, then awareness has the same benefit as defense. So here also counts, increase them at the same rate if you're making a build for Alistair and for Tower the Mad Mage and the Cyril trial, because they both have the same efficiency. And if you are at some point, and let me zoom in a second, then the lower one will give you more tankiness. We have here at 60% deflect severity what your deflect will increase your tankiness with. The light brown line is if you would increase them both at the same rate. I took 60% here instead of 90 because 60% seems to be a very reasonable value for deflect severity. 90% is, I think it's impossible to reach, but I'm not sure. I don't know everything. But 6% looked like much more of a reasonable value to look at. So if you have 6% deflect severity, then this will add quite a bit. Critical avoidance is somewhere in the middle of them. So deflect and deflect severity. Actually, if you don't have a lot of deflect severity, raising deflect and severity at the same time again, because once again, in this case, you always should lower the, to increase the lower of the two. So either deflect or severity, whichever is lower, because that will increase your tankiness the most. Critical avoidance is somewhere in between. But yeah, defense, by far, still the best stat to focus on. So if we zoom in again, leave out everything below 45%, because I don't think a tank will have anything below 45%. And this should give a better image of what to focus on first. So once again, if you have questions how to read this sheet, I can understand. It's not very simple to read. Maybe if you understand, then you are like, oh, this is how you read it. Okay. But if you have questions, I'm always available on Discord for questions, and just ask. I will respond whenever I have the chance. So that was kind of it. That brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys could follow the video a bit. Maybe I was rambling a little bit at some points, and it was quite mathematical at times. I tried to keep it as simple as I could. If I made any mistakes, which is possible of course, let me know. If you got this far, thank you for watching. And if you have any remarks in this video or any suggestions on what to investigate next, feel free to leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.